Awesome. So welcome. Thank you for taking the time to attend. I just one thing is that as people come in, I may be having to take some breaks to admit people. That is how this Zoom account works. But thank you for taking the time out of your busy day. We're looking forward to discussing some tips and techniques on how to optimize pricing in the face of churn and inflation. We are going to try to attempt a 20-minute talk time and leave 10 minutes for Q&A. It may go a little bit up and down, but we'll try our best. To start with, Jan will start the discussion. I will chime in, and then we'll cover more of like market trends that we are seeing, and then we'll cover more on our ideas around pricing specifically.
Right. Yeah, kind of putting in the context of generally speaking, the pricing and packaging transitions. Should we do a quick intro, Ajit?
Sure, yeah, let's do that. Yeah. So my name is Ajit. I met Jan a few years ago when I was actually still even learning pricing packaging. When we met, I was working at the company called Narvar. That's when I sort of got fascinated with the concept, went through a pricing change. We kept in touch. I joined Twilio, ran pricing team for them, wrote a book on pricing, learned a lot, consulted with a lot of companies, now have a company purely focused on pricing strategy as well as building some softwares around that. And Jan and I are partnering on this course, which has been doing well. So we're looking forward to discussing this with you today. Over to you, Jan.
And my background is database design. So that's where I have this very quantitative approach to pricing and kind of statistical analysis there. I have kind of built my career out of building pricing organizations in the companies that didn't have a dedicated pricing team. So I've done it for kind of LinkedIn, Citrix, LogMe, and Zoom, DocuSign, and Squarespace. And now I kind of run my own consulting practice where I do the same, but more of a walking in and helping companies go through a pricing transition.
Awesome.
So in terms of the kind of questions about inflation, and the key question that we get asked very often is, the inflation is reaching X. Does it mean that I should increase my prices? And that's a question usually asked by the FP&A, by the CFOs, sometimes product marketing. And very often the answer is no. And let us explain why it might be no. So the first thing is, what is inflation? The inflation metric that is kind of published in newspapers, on the news, is change of prices in a basket of goods. These are very often physical goods. The cost of those changes very often. It's correlated with a change of oil prices, change of transportation cost. They don't necessarily reflect well change of software prices. So that's where, as you see on the left-hand side, we kind of try to illustrate that point with the indication of how different prices for different categories, different types of goods has been changing from the year 2000. And if you take an average out of all those different categories, it doesn't mean that it's a very informative metric, because it contains so many different metrics that are drastically different from each other. So unfortunately, there is no one broadly recognizable software prices inflation metric that we can look up. There are some kind of category-based, let's say for video conferencing, we know that on average prices decrease 12% year on year. So it's very often that when we look, kind of zoom in into the category that you're in, the SaaS category that we mentioned here, your prices actually decrease year on year. And so let's flip to the next slide to explain why.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one comment here. Can you still? Yeah, so one of the things that is being called out is, changes happening in the market because of inflation, and companies saying, because of inflation, we are raising prices. Actually, what is happening really with SaaS companies is, because of this regime change of interest rates, where interest rates have gone up, you will see that valuations have gone down. As valuations go down, the amount of revenue and operating efficiency companies have to work at to justify the valuation that they're getting is much different now than it was before. So really, they may be increasing pricing for a completely different reason than inflation, which is in this category is actually historically has gone down. So that's just one thing I wanted to add, which is why the title of the slide is regime change. Next slide.
So to kind of explain the reduction of prices for SaaS products, we need to remember that this type of products very often has the price pressures that are related to commoditization. The journey that most of companies that I work with has gone through, which is a bit of a kind of common denominator, a trend, is that at the very beginning, each of those companies were a market leader, and they had a very new, innovative product that they invested a lot in R&D, in building the category. So think DocuSign, think Squarespace, even Zoom. Even though Zoom was not one of the first video conferencing, they had a product that worked quite differently to others. So that category is being built. There a lot of investment. The product is very premium, so that is reflected in the price points. And as the category is built, there is more understanding of kind of the utility of such a product. The demand increases, but also there is more competition because, you know, as the category grows, it seems like the pie gets bigger and there is more appetite for getting some shares of that pie. The kind of low price competition, the up and coming, what we sometimes call ankle biters, to the leader, the main company that provides the most premium solution, emerge. They don't have the same overheads of the R&D and category building of marketing. So that's when they can provide the product at much lower prices. So sticking to the DocuSign example, there is a PandaDoc. There are some much smaller but significantly cheaper solutions. And that happens to most of the functionality, the main functionality that the company has kind of was driven, the revenue stream is getting commoditized. So that's why the price points are getting kind of split, because on one hand, you still have the most premium version of the product, the most advanced, and we are able to maintain high prices, maybe even increase them for this subsection of customers who require the white glove service and the most sophisticated set of features. But then we also have the basic functionality heavily commoditized every year. That's where the majority of the volume is sold at lower and lower prices. So the high prices of the more premium option, they don't balance out the lower prices of that kind of premium or basic or low cost option, because that's kind of volume play. So overall, the level of pricing for that category is usually sliding down.
A couple other comments on what is actually happening, at least in software, which is the earlier point we're trying to make, is that the move toward companies are moving towards greater efficiency. So on the left, basically, Jason does a great job of amalgamating resources around what is happening in companies. You'll see that efficiency around top software companies is growing greater and greater. And on the right, there is a chart, a Substack that Jamin Ball publishes. There are a set of companies that he's following, and he's showing and demonstrating that the free cash flow companies are operating with is much higher, which is indicating that they're just a different sort of rules and regime that companies are operating in. And as well as there is a common metric that companies follow, which is the amount of revenue generated per employee. And that is getting up higher and higher in these days as well. So there is a focus to efficiency, and that may be causing some other issues, like, so especially if you're raising prices, and if that may not be happening very intelligently, you may be facing churn pressure. Now, what we are seeing on the left side is that the net retention rate actually has been declining in the same time frame That is probably a host of reasons. One is, everybody's facing the pressure, so everybody's trying to cash flow secured. So that may mean that upsells are reducing. That may mean that seats are reducing. If companies are becoming efficient, seats are anyway going to be cut. But also the thing that is important to note is for every SaaS company on the right side, this is a famous slide, which I really love, that by Price Intelligently, that they highlighted that monetizing the existing customer base is very important, right? So it is an important problem to solve because keeping NRR high is very often a key route for companies to IPO and having sustainable growth. So this is a sort of a balancing act where you're both trying to become efficient, you're both trying to generate cash flow, but you cannot do that while risking your existing customer base, because that is really where a lot of this money will be generated from. Would you like to add any comments here, Jan, before we go to the pricing section?
Yeah, as you're talking about the churn, and also as we just mentioned, the kind of price decreases and kind of the appetite for increasing prices. So kind of one topic that's related to those two is what I see quite often is in the situation when the overall level of cost increases because of inflation, the companies make a decision to increase the price point, even though it is maybe against the rules of value-based pricing. The customer's willingness to pay is not increasing, yet we are increasing prices predominantly that can work pretty well if we increase prices on existing customers. So the certain pattern that I've noticed is the increase on existing customers generates a lot of revenue. There is this kind of instant improvement in financial results. That's very encouraging. Sometimes even another increase is planned. However, we should remember that that's a loan. So that money will be taken away because very often churn will kind of wipe out that benefit in about 1 year time. And that can be a good, I'm not saying it's a bad decision. If a company needs a loan and they are going to spend that money on development of a new product or new functionality that would kind of move the weight of monetization from the commoditized functionality to something that's brand new, not commoditized, can command the higher premiums and price points, that's absolutely the right thing to do. But we should have a plan on then, after that's done, to kind of pay back the loan and potentially proactively lower the prices to prevent churn, because that delayed churn impact always happens.
Awesome. All right.
So in terms of the kind of downward pressure, and we were talking about the ways to lower price point. So it doesn't necessarily mean that we need to take exactly the same product and reduce the price point. So it is predominantly should be done in a way that allows us to kind of preserve more premium functionality and preserve ability to upgrade to more premium options. So that's when, in a situation when we see there is a lot of price pressure, when especially in a B2B market, our customers are looking for ways to cut their cost. Introducing some alternative that is maybe more basic, that those kind of like as you see, kind of light option of the product is something that works pretty well. And that still allows us to limit the cost for the customer while still preserving the upgrade path.
Yeah, definitely agree. Better than not providing any options there. As far as pricing metric, that's another thing that's happening where people may be cutting their user count, and that is where AI, specifically to AI companies, that is where we're seeing much more we will see much more pressure. I don't know whether we can say that we are seeing right now, but in some of the early studies with some of the customer service companies, they've been able to cut down a lot of the employees required to service customers. Therefore, that or the seat requirements are less important. Therefore, one is a move to different packaging options. But if you are a software company with a user-based metric, you have to sort of see why, if you have a downward reduction in user count, which is happening actually, if you see some of other Jamin Ball's studies or Jason Lemkin's published work, you will need to then think of other pricing metrics that are still aligned to value, but will not have the sort of pressure that you're facing. So this is just two exit scenarios that can happen. What the slide is showing is that you could have not enough people logging in, so people just left the client side company, or people may be complaining that our invoice is ballooning, but we don't see the value. So in both cases, you may be wanting to look at other metrics that solve the alignment problem, right? Because it's essentially an alignment problem from what you are offering and where the customers are seeing value, because the market is moving quite fast.
So one kind of related comment to this is, we often also see that if in the past we have used this heavily kind of bundled offerings, if we were trying to kind of force the customers to buy multiple products or functionalities in one go, and we were launching all those kind of suites of products, in those kind of churn downgrade pressure situations, we're going to see a lot of need for decoupling and kind of picking only the elements of the product, the features that the customer really takes advantage of. So kind of, again, matching more with what they get value out of. We might need to kind of debundle if we heavily bundled in the past.
Yeah, makes sense.
So kind of to my point about the bundling, this is kind of a commonly used map of different pricing structures that are used in SaaS. On the far left-hand side, you see that's kind of the simplest one-size-fits-all. That's what Netflix used to use, where they basically had one package, one price. On the right-hand side is this kind of a la carte, fully flexible packaging style. So the general tendency in a situation when the kind of money is tight and there is a lot of pressure is to move towards more of the a la carte. So in kind of good times, the customers are maybe more likely to do some of the kind of buying where they predict what features they will be needing. They kind of aspire to higher adoption. It's kind of more of an aspirational buy. They would buy a whole bundles, more of a suites of products. When there is this kind of budget tightness, then they only buy what they already are using right now, and they are shedding elements that they are not utilized. So if you don't allow them to shed certain elements, then they might replace your product with the solution that has more flexible packaging structure and allows them only to buy the elements that they require. It is important to mention that even if we are not per se kind of charging for the elements that they are not using, that argument is usually not working. So if we say, well, we are giving you 4 features in this package for $20 a month, but we are only charging you for the 3 of them, so the 4th one is thrown in for free. That might work in the moment when we are selling the package. When the new kind of manager of the account comes over, that usually results in a request for discount. So we should be able to kind of officially only provide the elements that they need through more a la carte packaging.
Yep. Okay, so scenario 1, customer use disproportion to pay as you go model. What was this potential solution to margin pressure? So pay as you go, if you had a metric which was pay as you go earlier, what is going to happen in case of margin, like this whole churn or margin pressure? When people stop using you, there is going to be an immediate reduction in revenue. And that has called out, if you follow some of the key analysts in the SaaS space, you will see a drastic reduction in revenue from companies like Snowflake or Twilio or other companies that had usage-based pricing once this whole interest rate regime went up. So things that you can do to mitigate that is you can have usage-based pricing with some sort of platform fee. You can have add-ons or upsells with the platform fee, or you can have lump sum. In the second scenario I'm showing, lump sum. You can say, okay, I'm going to send you a bundle of usage rather than saying it's pay as you go. You can pay as you go. The second scenario is gross margin pressure due to intermediate costs. So what may also happen, and especially again in the case of AI companies, but not just in the case of AI companies, there will be third-party costs that may increase very fast, such as you're using a telecom vendor and the SMS, WhatsApp fees is either increased or some other service that you're using increases. Data storage is commonly very expensive. You're using some sort of GPT and the AI tokens are expensive. You will notice some companies saying, hey, our platform fee is a platform fee and you paid in XYZ fashion, but you please pay us separately for the amount of usage of this core service, because it is often the one that is connected to high costs on their end. So that may be one way that they offload that, and that you can think about offloading it, because if you lump in everything and you say, hey, this is one price for X dollars per user, you will see that your margin will get eroded very fast. So you can pass through some of the costs as long as it would make sense for your, of course, you will have to do some research, make sure that the customers will accept that. And then the other options are you can build more defenses around completely pay as you go plan. So you have some sort of upsells or platform fee or some added offerings to build more revenue predictability. So those are things you can do. You can also look into, like in my book, I talk about two-part tariffs and three-part tariffs. So platform fee essentially is a two-part tariff. Three-part tariffs are things like cell phone plans where you say, it's $50 for 5 GB data usage and it's $90 for unlimited. So you want the customer to opt into the higher selection so that you can lock in the revenue. So there are all these things that can tactically be done as far as pricing is concerned to alleviate that margin pressure. Okay, so those were most of our slides. We are actually in time, so we're happy to take some questions. If you're facing any challenges with churn or margin, we're happy to give your thoughts, or if you want something clarified, feel free to unmute yourselves.
I think we touched on so many different topics, from metrics, price points, packaging, kind of usage-based pricing. So happy to dig a little bit deeper in the topic that you find the most relevant for your situation. And if you want to go through all of those topics in depth, then you're always welcome to join our today course.
Does anybody have any comments on why they found the topic interesting? Are they seeing anything related to any of these themes at your current companies you'd like to discuss? Okay, I don't see we have any questions, so we'll just summarize. Number one, there is inflation, but it may not be there's a question.
There you go.
Okay, I'll just summarize. So there is inflation, but it's not necessarily happening in software. What is happening in software and SaaS companies is a lot of pressure to provide cash flow given the interest rate environment. Therefore, there is a move to efficiency, but there is also a reduction in NRR, and there is churn pressure, right? So there is churn pressure, there is margin pressure, both happening at the same time. Pricing can help, and most often, Jan and I observe companies have in there are structural opportunities companies have with pricing. The most obvious thing is not to just increase the price point. The most obvious thing could be create a smaller tier where people can move to instead of just churning. You can create a different pricing metric if people are not willing to pay by number of seats. If number of seats is becoming the metric that is not going to work in the future, there are options that you have that if you've had a revenue shortfall and like unpredictable revenue because of the way that you had your pricing metric, you can add defenses around the pricing metric, such as platform fees. You can think about different tariff structures, and you can think about passing on some of the cost to customers that makes sense while not necessarily changing other parts of the pricing. So there's a lot of options there. The one we see very often used is just a blanket increasing in price points. Those may be okay if you are a monopoly. They may not be okay, and you may see churn pressure because of that, because it's a brute force approach, and there are more tools available. Right? The biggest thing I want to leave you with is there are levers that you have access to that your management may not think about, and most leadership teams just blanket increase prices. I am not sure that works unless you're Google or like there are really no other competition. And even Google has competition nowadays, but not for search.
It can work as long as we are prepared that it's a short-term solution and we have the next step.
Yeah. All right. So we are offering a 33% discount on the course to attendees of this webinar. You can use the QR code. We'll also send you the links, and these are some of the reviews from our page. So we like to do the course. So far, we've gotten good reviews. So looking forward to having you on the course if you find it interesting. But thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you.